Good morning, class. We're going to go over section 5.4. We're going to look at inverses, contrapositives, and indirect reasoning. So we're going to go through a little bit more proof type stuff. So it's not mathy in the sense of numbers. It's a logical reasoning. And logic is still a mathematical part. So we want to write the negation, we want to write the inverse and contrapositive, and then we're going to look at indirect reasoning. So we'll start with negation. Negation simply means to say the opposite. So if ABC is an obtuse angle, the opposite of saying it is obtuse is saying it's not obtuse. Angle ABC is not obtuse. If it were, so you can go backwards too. If they said ABC is not obtuse, then to negate that, we'd say it is. So if it has not in there, we get it away to negate it. So we're just saying the opposite. Negation is just saying the opposite of what we wanted. Okay? We want to write the negation of the today is not Tuesday. To negate that, we'd say today is Tuesday. We go to the next one. So an inverse. Inverse just negates both the hypothesis and the conclusion. So we look at if a figure is a square, then it is a rectangle. To write the inverse of that, we'd say if a figure is not a square, then it is not a rectangle. Contrapositive, then, we negate both the hypothesis and the conclusion, and we switch the order. So we'd say if a figure is not a rectangle, then it is not a square. So again, we switch the hypothesis and the conclusion, and we negated both of them. So we'll go through an example of each one of those. We'll go through an example of negating. So the angle is not obtuse. We'd say the angle is obtuse. We write the inverse of it. So the inverse would just be negating. If you eat all your vegetables, then you will grow. To negate that, we'd say if you don't eat all your vegetables, then you won't grow. And then lastly, our contrapositive, we're going to switch the hypothesis and the conclusion as we negate them. So if you don't grow, then you didn't eat all your vegetables. So if you don't grow, then you didn't eat all your vegetables. So we have those three things. Negating, stating the opposite. Inverse, negating the hypothesis and the conclusion. And the contrapositive, negating the hypothesis and conclusion and switching the order. This is just a quick review of what we've done. We had a conditional, was an if-then statement. Remember the converse. The converse was switching the order of the hypothesis and the conclusion. So we've done that before. Now we're negating, stating the opposite. The inverse is negating, or making them both stating the opposite, the hypothesis and the conclusion. And the contrapositive is negating them and switching the order. So indirect reasoning, as we go through it, we're considering all possibilities, and then all but one is kind of proof false. So you're going to see the remaining possibilities must be true. So an indirect proof is what we're going to look at. So here's how we do an indirect proof. We're going to state the assumption of the opposite of what you want to prove. So we want to prove today is Wednesday. What we're going to do is we're going to say today is not Wednesday, and then we're going to go through a proof of. We're going to show that it's false. So we're going to negate. First step is negate. Then show why that negation must be false. And then we'll conclude with what we wanted to prove, as we've always done. So prove that a quadrilateral QRWX does not have, does not have four acute angles. So our first step is we assume the opposite. So we'd say quadrilateral QRWX has four acute angles. Well, if you have four acute angles, then we have four angles that are less than 90 degrees. In a quadrilateral, in a four-sided figure, our angles need to add up to 180. So if we have four angles that are less than 90, and total they need to add up to 180, then this can't be. And so, therefore, so that's what you'd say. If quadrilateral has four acute angles, then the sum of the angles is less than 180. Okay? All right? Which cannot be. You can't have it less than 180. So, this is how we conclude. This is our conclusion. Therefore, QRWX, or quadrilateral QRWX, does not have four acute angles. Your last statement is always going to be what we wanted to prove up there. So let's do one more. So here's our given fact. The total cost of two items is more than $50. we want to prove at least one of the items costs more than $25. Well, we're going to assume the opposite. So if we assume that one of the items costs more, to state the opposite, we'd say that the items cost less than $25. So if each item costs less than $25, then the total cost would be less than $50. If the total cost is less than $50, then that doesn't add up to what we already know, that it's more than $50. So that contradicts the given fact and we would say, therefore, at least one of the items costs $25 or more than $25. So we want to switch that. $25 costs more than $25. So that's our lesson for today, is going through and looking at negating, stating the opposite. Converse is negating the hypothesis and conclusion, and the contrapositive, negating and switching the order. And lastly, an indirect proof. To do an indirect proof, state the opposite, and then explain why you would get a contradiction.